Hey, welcome back to your Dream Coach podcast. I'm Shayla Way. And today I want to talk to you about something that I have watched quietly derail more growing businesses than almost any other single factor. And it's not the market, it's not the product, it is not even the team, although the team is often where the symptoms first show up. It's the gap. The gap between how fast the business is growing and how fast the leader is growing. The space between the demands of the business at its current size and the leadership capability of the person running it. That gap, when it exists and goes unaddressed, is where businesses plateau, cultures break down, and founders start to feel like they are being outrun by the very thing they built. This episode is about that gap, what it looks like, why it happens, how to know if you are in it, and exactly what to do to close it. If your business has been growing and something has started to feel harder than it should, this one is for you. So let's get into it. Well, let me describe it precisely because this gap tends to be felt before it is understood. Your listener will recognize the feeling long before they sometimes have the language for what it is causing it. And so the business is growing, revenue is up, the team is bigger than it was a year ago. But every external measure, things are working. And yet something feels harder than it used to. Decisions that used to feel clear now feel murky. The team that used to feel manageable now feels like a lot to hold. And problems that used to solve in an afternoon now linger for weeks. You are working harder than you ever have and somehow making less progress than you expected. And underneath all of it is a quiet, uncomfortable feeling that you are not quite the right fit for the business that you've built. And that the company has grown into something that you are not fully equipped to lead yet. And that feeling is not failure, it's information. And it is pointing directly at the gap. And so here's how to think about it clearly. When you started your business, the leadership demands were a certain size. Let's call that level 1. Your capability at the time was enough to meet those demands, maybe even exceed them. And the business then grew. And the demands grew with it. And your capability grew too, but perhaps not at the same rate. Perhaps not in the same directions. And now you're leading a level 3 business with level 2 leadership capability. And the 1-point gap between what the business needs and what you're currently giving it is where all that friction lives. So the gap is not a character flaw. It is not a natural consequence of growth. Every business that grows fast enough will eventually outpace its founder's current capability. The ones that make it through are led by people who recognize the gap and do the work to close it. The ones that plateau or break down are led by people who either do not see it or are too proud to acknowledge it. So your business is not broken. You just have simply grown a business that is ready for the next version of your leadership. The question is whether you're ready to become that version. So before we get into what to do about it, I want to spend a few minutes on why this gap opens up. Because understanding the cause changes how you approach closing it. Growth happens faster than development because growth, when conditions are right, can happen very quickly. A great product, a strong market, the right timing, and revenue can double or triple in a year. Leadership development does not work that way. It is slower, messier, and less linear. Skills like delegation, strategic thinking, culture building, and leading through ambiguity take time and repetition and often failure to develop. So when the business outpaces the development, the gap opens. And this is not a sign that the growth was wrong. It's a sign that the development needs to accelerate. Now, the same skills that built it are not always the skills that scale it. So this is one of the most consistent patterns that I've watched across 2 decades of leadership development. Is the capabilities that made you excellent as a founder or early stage operator are not always the same ones required to lead the business at its next level. The hustle, the hands-on execution, the personal relationships with every client, the ability to hold everything in your head and react fast, those things built what you have. But at a certain size, those same instincts become the ceiling. So the business needs a leader who can delegate, build systems, develop other leaders, make decisions from strategy rather than intuition, and hold a vision clearly enough that the whole organization can move toward it without the founder touching everything. The transition from founder to CEO is a leadership identity shift as much as a role shift. And many founders try to make it without acknowledging that it requires becoming something new. Now, the dream may have even grown faster than the leader. Sometimes the gap opens because the dream itself expanded. You started with one version, and then the business grew in directions that took you somewhere bigger and more complex than you originally planned. So the dream is now larger than the leader who conceived it. And that is not a problem. That is actually evidence that the dream is alive and growing. But it does require the leader to grow into it rather than trying to manage it from the version of themselves that first imagined it. So the 5 signs that your growth is outpacing your leadership is, and that the gap has opened. And I want you to be honest with yourself as you listen to these, because most leaders in this situation recognize at least 3 of them. Sign number 1 is that you are the bottleneck on almost every decision. Things slow down when you're unavailable. The team is capable but does not feel empowered to move without your input. So you are CC'd on emails you should not need to see and pulled into conversations that should be resolved without you. And so the business has grown, but the decision making has not been distributed to match it. And that is not a team problem, it's a leadership architect problem. And it is one of the clearest early signs of the gap. Sign number 2 is that you're managing problems instead of leading strategy. So you can feel the difference between a day when you are leading, setting direction, building capability, thinking strategically, and a day where you are just managing, putting out fires, responding to what comes in, solving problems that should have been prevented by better systems. So if the majority of your days feel like the second kind, the gap is probably open. The business has grown to a size where it needs your strategic thinking and leadership, but you are still spending most of that time in operational execution. Now, sign 3 is that culture is happening to you rather than through you. So in the early days, culture was easy to shape because you were close to everything. You modeled the values, you could see every interaction, you could correct the course in real time. And as the business grows, culture has to be designed and transmitted through systems, rituals, and other leaders rather than through your personal presence alone. So if you're starting to notice cultural drift, inconsistency is how different parts of the team operate, standards slipping in areas that you are not personally watching. And that is really the sign that the culture infrastructure has not kept pace with the growth. Sign 4 is that you feel increasingly isolated at the top. Now, this one is felt more than observed because as the business grows, the leader often becomes more isolated. The problem gets bigger and more complex. The stakes feel higher, and there are fewer and fewer people around you who've experienced what you're navigating. So you have a team, you have clients, even a strong community, but a growing sense that you are carrying something nobody around you fully understands. So that isolation is normal at a certain growth stage, but is also a signal that the leader needs developmental support that matches the level of the challenge. Now, the 5th sign is the dream feels further away, not closer. So this is the one that hurts most to admit because you've been building. The business is growing. And somehow the version of the dream that you're working towards feels less vivid and less attainable than it did when you started. Not because the dream is wrong, but because the gap between where you are as a leader and where that dream requires has widened. And what I guess should say the dream requires has just widened. But because the gap between where you are as a leader and what the dream requires has widened, and a dream that is being pursued from below the capability it requires starts to feel like pressure rather than pull. So when the dream starts to feel heavy rather than energizing, that is almost always a sign that the leader needs to grow into that rather than pushing harder toward it. So here's the good news is that the gap is closable. Every leader who has built past the size they were originally equipped for has had to close this gap at some point. And the ones who do it intentionally, who treat their own business, their development, I guess I should say, as the most important project in the business, are the ones whose businesses make the leap to the next level. And so here are 4 specific ways to close it. 1 is to name the gap honestly. The first move is simply to start pretending the gap is not there. To look at where the business is and where your leadership capability is, and be honest about the distance between them. Not with self-criticism, but with the same clear-eyed curiosity that you would bring to any other business problem. What specifically are the leadership capabilities the business now needs that you do not have yet? And where are you operating from your old capability set when the business needs your new one. Name it, write it down, because you cannot grow towards something and that you have not clearly defined. Number 2 is to invest in your development as deliberately as you invest in the business. Most founders will spend significant time and money on marketing, product development, technology, and team. They will invest in almost everything except their own leadership growth. And then they wonder why the business has outpaced them. Your development is not a nice to have. It is the single highest leverage investment available to you. A coaching relationship, a mastermind, a course, a mentor who is led at the level that you are growing toward, whatever the form, the investment in becoming the leader your business needs is always worth more than it costs. Number 3 is build the leadership infrastructure that distributes what only you are currently doing. Part of closing the gap is not just growing as an individual leader, but building the structure that scale your leadership beyond personal capacity. This means identifying the decision only you should be making and actively transferring everything else to your team. It means building the communication systems, the accountability frameworks, the cultural rituals that carry your values through the organization without requiring your personal presence in every interaction. The goal is not for you to do more, it is for your leadership to have more reach. And number 4 is to let the dream pull you forward, not pressure you into rushing. Here's the dream connection that I want to close with. The gap between who you are and what the dream requires is not a crisis, it's a direction. And the dream is showing you who you need to become, and becoming that person is not something you force or rush or grind your way through. It is something you grow into deliberately and consistently over time. The entrepreneurs that I've watched make this transition most powerfully were not the ones who panicked at the gap and tried to close it in a week. They were the ones who looked at it clearly, set an intention to grow, got the support they needed, and then trusted the process. They let the dream do what dreams do best, pull them toward a version of themselves they could not quite yet see, but were committed to becoming. So I want to close with something that I genuinely believe and want you to carry forward. The fact that your business has outgrown your current leadership capability is not evidence that you are the wrong person for this. It is evidence that you have built something real, something that has grown past its original design, and something that is asking you to grow with it. That is not a warning, that is an invitation. And the leaders who accept that invitation, who say yes to the growth the business is asking for, who invest in their own development with the same seriousness that bring to everything else in the business, those are the leaders who build the things that are worth building. The ones that last, the ones that matter, the ones that the dream was always pointing toward. You can be that leader. You are already that leader in the making. The gap is just the space between who you are today and who the dream has always needed you to become. So if this episode landed for you, share it with the founder who you know is in the middle of this. The gap is lonelier when you think you're the only one in it. And reviews on Apple Podcasts, 3 minutes will help, make a genuine impact. So I appreciate that. And thank you so much. Next episode, we are talking about one of the most common and costly hiring mistakes small business owners make and how to stop it from happening in your business. I will see you then. Until then, dream bigger, lead better, and we'll see you on the next episode.